In this Photoshop quick fix video, we're going to take a look at how to quickly and easily silhouette this camera from the white background. If you're doing any kind of product photography or anything like that in a white box, you'll find this extremely helpful, especially if you need to remove the background so that it's transparent or add a different color or different kind of background to your image. So for this particular task, we're going to use the quick selection tool since we have pretty even color around the camera here. And the quick select tool makes it extremely simple to select the areas that we want to ultimately remove. So to get started, I'll just simply left mouse click here in the upper left hand corner. It doesn't really matter where I start. And I'm just moving my cursor along, and you'll notice that it's adding to my selection, and it's really paying attention to the edge of the camera, and you'll notice just that quick it filled in the blanks, but it also included the stand here, and we'll come back and remove that in a second. I also need to remove the white in this area here as well as in the rewind lever here. And you'll notice that the tool is set to plus, which is by default. So I'm just going to click in here, and that'll take care of the white in that area. We'll click in there and in here, and you'll notice that it also selected some of the metal because the color is close. So I'll go back, and holding the Alt key down or the Option key, I can add part of this metal back in here again, because we don't want that to be deleted. And actually there's a small piece there too. So it's really just a matter of going in and tweaking your selection using the positive and the negative brushes to where you get it to where you're happy. And I just noticed here that this little button, we need to bring that back in. So I'll just hold the Alt key down and add that in, and then see if we can get these corners in here a little bit. Whoop, too far. See if we can get there a little bit more too. And see if we can bring a little more of this button here in. And then lastly here, again, I'm holding the Alt key down because we're subtracting. Didn't need to zoom in quite that much. And it's actually not bad looking. So you can see where it's not 100% perfect, but it's pretty darn close. Let's just see if we can tighten this area up a little bit. I mean, considering the alternative for really cleaning up this camera, this saves so much time working with this particular tool. Now, the one thing that I will point out here as we're going through this is that there are some cases where this tool just will not work as effectively as it may in others. And after we finish this camera, I'm going to actually show you a case study where that is the truth. Okay, so I think all of our white area is selected the way we want it. So the next thing we want to do is invert the selection. And to do that, we're going to hit Command Shift I or Control Shift I, depending on whether you're on a PC or a Mac. And actually, you know what? I just noticed this little area here. Let's see if we can. There we go. Okay, so Control Shift I inverts the selection, and then I can just Control C or Command C to copy it, Control or Command V to paste it, and we have our camera that's transparent. Now, one thing, at first glance, you might think, oh yeah, it's perfect, but the real test here, and this is something that you want to pay attention to, especially if you're silhouetting a dark object, is to create a layer and fill it to black. And that way you'll see any highlighting or anything like that. Like you'll notice around the handle here and around the bottom, there's still a little bit of ghosting. And there's a couple ways to get around that. One way is to select your object by control clicking it, and then come up to selection, modify, contract, and contract by 1 pixel. Okay, and then we're going to invert the selection, so Control Shift I again, and hit delete. And whenever I deselect that, you'll notice that it's much cleaner. Another thing that I'll do sometimes is before I actually copy and paste it, I'll feather the pixels by 1. And sometimes that'll make it a little bit cleaner. And one more option that I'll point out here is that in some cases, if you have just a faint hairline around certain edges, you can come up to Layer, scroll down to where it says Matting, and choose Defringe. And usually a setting of 1 or 2 will take care of any of that additional fringing that happens around the image. So you can see that it just cleaned it up a little bit more. If I do before and after, you'll notice especially in the handle area here. So that's it for this camera. Now, in a perfect world, all of your silhouetting will be against a white background. Unfortunately, we don't always live in a perfect world, and you're going to want to have some solid tools for silhouetting against other backgrounds, like this one. Now, in this case, because there's so many details in the background and different color ranges and all of that, and the colors even affecting the camera here, the trees, the quick select tool or the magic wand tool, neither one of those are going to work well. So really the best option is to either use one of the lasso tools or the path tools. And in this particular case, I think the path tool is what's going to make the most sense for us. So it's very straightforward and probably not quite as fast as we just went through the last camera, but nearly as fast. So what I want to do is select the, what are we going to use? We're just going to use the regular pen tool so that we have the benefit of straight lines. And I'm going to just click. And I'm going to zoom in even more so we can see exactly what we're doing. And right now, what I'm interested in primarily is just getting the basic path down, and then we're going to go back and tweak it. So you can see all I'm really doing is just clicking my way around the camera. Anytime there's a change, I'll add a new point. And by the way, while you're working, if you need to move around your image like I'm doing, if you hold the spacebar down, it turns into a hand tool, and that'll allow you to move around your object. Now it's a little hard to see in this area, so I'm just going to make an assumption here and draw a line here and then come across. So the great thing about using this particular method, and again, there's a lot of different methods that we could use, from using a mask and silhouetting around it and erasing and all of that. But what I've found over the years in having to silhouette a lot of objects like this is that working with paths is ultimately the fastest and easiest way and the least amount of headaches. Okay, so now we have our basic path drawn. So now it's time to go in and edit that path, and we can do that a number of ways. We're going to want to convert some of these points, and actually in some cases maybe even delete one or two, like this one here. I don't think we're going to need. And this one here, we're just going to click and drag that a little bit. And let's see, want to reposition this one. So now it's just a matter of fine-tuning the path that you've drawn. And we can add a little bit of curve to that just by, we don't need a lot. And if you have any questions about exactly how to tweak certain parts of the path, you can refer back to that video that I created that shows you exactly how to adjust the different path areas and all of that. So now you notice all that I'm doing is just fine-tuning, adding some slight curves where they're needed, fine-tuning the position of the points, and we can zoom in as far as we need to get those positions perfect. And I think we can probably delete a couple of these anchor points here. So really it just ultimately comes down to taking a little bit of time, but in the grand scheme of things, we're really not spending a huge amount of time to accomplish something that using any other method here in Photoshop would take us a lot longer, trust me. Okay, we're actually in pretty good shape. Just bring that up here a little bit. And I need to reposition that just a little bit there. And so here's what I'm doing. I am repositioning the points, and then where it's needed, I'm using the convert point tool to convert the drawn points into curves so that it'll fit the curve of the camera where that's necessary. So you can see, like right there, there's a bit of a curve around, so I can just choose the convert point tool and add a curve. And believe it or not, we're actually almost done. All right, and so we'll move this here. And actually, we probably don't need all of these anchor points. We can get rid of this one and that one, and then just use the center one to control the curve around the button here. And we need to reposition that. Kind of move that in there. And we actually, I just noticed, probably should add another point or two right in there. That way we can anchor this first part here and then bring the second one in like so. Just form fit that in. I'm actually going to add another point in there. It's amazing how just as quickly as we clicked around it the first time, once you're zoomed in, you can really see where additional adjustments are needed sometimes. Okay. All right, so I think we're done there. So now the moment of truth. And what we're going to do is right mouse click. And we have a couple choices. We can create a mask and go in and use the mask to fine tune it even more. Or we can just make a selection. And I'm going to go with a feather radius of 1 just because it makes sense. And then I'm going to copy, Control C, paste, Control V, and we have our silhouetted camera. Now remember before how we did the test with adding a layer and filling the black? So not bad, right? Now one more thing that we can do, and this is just kind of an aside, but In some cases, you may actually run into this problem. You'll notice how, because this image was shot in nature, some of the camera has a green cast to it. Well, we can actually correct that pretty easily just by having the black selected, choose the mode, make sure that the mode is set to color, and then we can just go in and paint. You want to make sure the opacity is up to 100%, and then what we're going to do is just shift the color. So you can see essentially what it's doing is it's removing the green and replacing it with the black. Now there's some scenarios where this may not work as effectively, or where you have to maybe have to be a little bit more careful. In this case, it's pretty straightforward for us because we're dealing with levels of gray in the camera itself. So that makes it fairly easy to remove all of that extra green tinting that we ended up with because the photograph was shot outside. Just come down here. Now you'll notice like in this area right here we have red, so I'm going to want to be careful not to affect that area, or just to be very cautious around the red so that it doesn't remove that. And I think we'll just adjust that there slightly. The lenses I'll leave the way they are because that kind of looks cool. Just do this whole thing here. And of course the good news is that you could really tint this to whatever you choose. Like if you want to have a slightly blue cast to the black, you could very easily do that. Just very subtle, so that if I go in and paint, you notice how it's just slightly different. It has a slight blue cast to it. So you can see the difference. Okay, so it really depends on the look that you want to achieve from your image. Excuse me, and the type of image that you're working with. Oh, oh gosh, that's funny. There's another thing that you want to pay attention to. I'm glad that I made that mistake actually. And that is that whenever you're painting in the color, if there's transparency, it'll show up. So you want to make sure that you lock the layer. Okay, so what we're going to do is remove all of our painting, and I'm going to go through it again real quick. Lock the layer, and now let's just, to save time, make a bigger brush. So now it won't paint over the background because the layer is locked. So you definitely want to pay attention to that. Holy cow. But I'm glad that that happened so that you can see just how careful you need to be with some of this. And we're just going to forget the red that was there before. And actually, let's just do some of this area here too. Okay, so that's much better. So now we have our silhouetted camera, and it's very, very clean looking.